Dr. Kate Guthrie here. Pleasure to meet you all in this video. In this short little video, I'm going to be covering this idea of a curriculum compactor. And so far, in the midst of learning about a lot of differentiation strategies that you can do to support your gifted learners, and one of those being compacting or curriculum compacting, there is indeed out there a document, a tool that's been going around in the field of gifted education for a while that was first developed by Renzulli and his team called the curriculum compactor. And so for our week 4 discussion, where we're integrating the content, we're going to be taking those ideas of curriculum compacting and applying it to your content area, to your classroom in this little activity of a curriculum compactor. So I'm going to first explain and demonstrate or show you, kind of give you a tour through a curriculum compactor and what goes into it. And then I will show you the template that you will complete for your week 4 discussion. All right, so without further ado, the curriculum compactor is based on this idea of curriculum compacting. So just in review and summary of some of the content that you've already read and processed thus far, is curriculum compacting is a way of streamlining grade level curriculum for gifted and high potential students. Streamlining mean we're taking all of this content that would be in, I'm just going to use, for example, a unit of study or block of study, and compacting it. So instead of covering all this material in 6 weeks, perhaps we cover it with the student in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 1 week or 4 weeks, but you're compacting it in some way, specifically for those few students who really need it. So some of these procedures include defining the goals and outcomes of the particular unit of study, determining how you're going to figure out which students have already met those goals and outcomes from day one. I know I can recall many students who, as soon as I would start a unit in the classroom, I already knew they basically knew the whole thing before I had even started. So this is a strategy that's for them. And then after you have defined the goals and outcomes and determined how you're going to assess if students have met those goals or outcomes, you're then going to brainstorm replacement strategies for the material that can be used in place of that. So that's that idea of, if you're in our material already, the kind of cashing in on curriculum compacting. So the curriculum compactor is a document that looks like this. It has 3 columns. You might see derivatives of this, as some people have been able to adapt it, and you'll see a slight derivative of it for your week 4 discussion. But there are 3 columns. The first column are curriculum areas to be considered for compacting. So we're going to talk about what is the unit of study and how do we, some behaviors that might give us some evidence or some inkling that a child might be ready for that curriculum compacting of that unit of study. The second column are for procedures for compacting basic material, and the third column is for acceleration and or enrichment activities. So this is a form that you fill out as the teacher that could then be its own learning contract with you and the child. So another way to think of these 3 columns is this: name it, prove it, change it. In the name it, you're asking, or you're listing, you're documenting what materials are going to be covered in that unit, so either listing the standards or describing the unit of study. And then what evidence shows a need for compacting, either evidence being previous data you have on the child, previous scores on projects or assessments, or even classroom behaviors in your own observations. The second column, proving it, you're proving, you the teacher, are making decisions to prove that this child needs curriculum compactor and this child is ready for it. So you're going to discuss either what exactly the material that you're going to exclude and how you're going to prove mastery. Sometimes the quickest way for compacting, usually it's best if you can kind of figure out at the beginning of a unit of study who's in need of compacting, and that's often with a pretest or a pre-assessment. Or perhaps there's an opening activity that you do with students that starts to give you an idea of where they're at. Whatever that activity is, that's what you're using here in this prove it column. And then you're going to try and find this threshold of how do you know if, based on how the student performed, if they're ready for it. So for a pretest, it could be, scoring 80% or higher on a pretest, or 85%. You have this kind of arbitrary cutoff score, but maybe there's a cutoff score that you think fits with you and your curriculum. The third column is changing it. So this is where you're documenting, writing down what enrichment or acceleration activities are going to be included. So here's where you can fit in lots of different teaching strategies for gifted and high ability students of things to replace the traditional curriculum. So it could be acceleration. It could just be pushing them faster through the rest of the material. Courses that are fairly linear content areas are fairly linear, like mathematics, sometimes that could be appropriate. It could be an own independent study, so maybe there's a research project they want to do, a book study that they want to do to dive deeper into something that's related to the unit at hand. It could be a mini course, it could be a college course if you're in the high school, small group investigation if you've got a chunk of kids, a chunk of students who a curriculum compactor is appropriate for, or an own independent work study. So lots of things can go in that third column. So I'm just going to breeze through these because I think I've essentially already said it. But in that first column, again, it's the data that you are capturing to create this profile of who, either for a specific student or for this kind of imaginary student. You can have general strengths listed or general data that signifies to you that curriculum compacting may be appropriate. That second column, that's where you're documenting those pre-assessments, you're specifying the level of achievement you expect, and you're documenting the students' scores. And here in column 2, it's important to remind yourself that children or students, they might not know everything in the unit of study before you get started. So if they make an 85% if they reach 85% proficiency on the pretest, they know a lot of it already without being taught it. And so, but there still might be that 15% that they need covered for many reasons. Either that 15% is going to be needed in the next unit, or it's on the benchmark test or whatever. You still want to, here in that second column, decide how you're going to assess that, or how you're still going to give that material to the student, whether it's in the form of a mini lesson or a differentiated homework assignment or a differentiated in-class activity. But that's something that you'll want to think about in that prove it column. The third column, the change it column, again, that's where you're listing your acceleration and enrichment activities. Now, I do want you to consider individual student strengths or interests for that third column. You can make a curriculum compactor specifically with one student in mind, or you can make a general one that you think will be appropriate or interesting for a future student. I will say, as a word of caution, again, don't make the work harder or don't make it be more of it. Students get that message. They can see right through us, and so try not to do that. Aim for that third column, that acceleration enrichment activity, to be engaging and challenging. You can also consider inviting the student to be part of that curricular option, so part of determining what it is they want to explore and do or create in that third column. So for your week 4 discussion of integrating the content, I have sort of devised a very abbreviated version of a curriculum compactor for you. So you're not going to write a novel about how you're going to curriculum compact for a student, but I want you to start just thinking about this idea of how you would compact for one unit of study. So you're going to pick one unit of study and you're going to fill out just 6 little boxes, 2 boxes for column 1, 2 boxes for column 2, and 2 boxes for column 3. And in just a moment, I'm going to pull up the document and guide you through that. And you'll take a few moments to reflect on the unique characteristics and adaptability of the strategy. So probably in a reflection statement of 3 to 5 sentences, and then pose 1 or 2 questions for your peers. So let's take a look at this document in depth. So this first column, I'm actually going to pull the document up a little bit bigger so that you can see it. And this first column, then name it. You're going to download this Word document that is provided for you in the discussion post. And in that first curriculum area to be considered for compacting, I want you to replace that text with a short description of the unit of study to be compacted. So just name it. What is it? Describe it. And then down here in that second box for column 1, replace that text with information or evidence that suggests the need for compacting. This could be outstanding test scores, mastery on previously related unit, behaviors in class, etc. You can just list those in bullet points. For the second column, procedures for compacting the basic material. In that first box, I want you to replace that text with procedures you will use or procedures you will implement to ensure that the student has mastered content and needs compacting. And I say master there as in like has reached proficiency for a large chunk of your unit already. And so that could be scoring 85% or higher on a pretest, a project, or an opening activity. You can include observations here, anything that you would use to help determine or assess if the child is ready. In the second box, I want you to replace that text with your plan to supplement any material of the unit that the student still needs to cover. So if there was anything that was still confusing on that pretest or that activity, or if you know that there's some part of the unit that that child has never explored before and needs it because of whatever comes in the future, then either consider ways of either pulling that child in away from their activity that they're doing instead of their curriculum, pulling them in for those mini lessons when they need to be pulled in, or compacting them and bringing them up to the front, giving them a differentiated homework assignment or differentiated in-class activity that then will let them explore that so that they were then ready to move on to the acceleration or enrichment activity. So in the COM 3, these 2 boxes basically say the same thing. I want you to figure out or come up with 2 activities or projects or experiences that you can use that a child would have an option to do. They could pick either one, either the top one or the bottom one, that they would use to supplement some of the material or supplement their time rather, in order to explore something more deeply. So make sure that what you include here in this 3rd column is that it's not an activity that could be completed in a day. You know, if my unit 6 is 4 weeks long and we get all the compacting with this one student done and within the first week, then I have 3 weeks with the student where that's where they're exploring something deeper. So it could be, you know, a research study, or signing them up for a writing competition, or working on the science fair project, or doing their own independent book study, and then they'll present something to the class. So it should be something that's rigorous and challenging, but also interesting, and also you think is appropriate for the time allotment that you have. And so that is your week 4 discussion of integrating the content. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, but I will give you specific directions on how to post this table in your discussion forum post. That way it will be easy to read, and I enjoy reading them and seeing you all on a discussion forum. If you have any questions, send an email my way.